Unfortunately, since the recording of this podcast, we have had some bad news as this coronavirus has taken a toll on the soon-to-be Fiero show season. Is the Dells Run and the Back to the 80s that Rob and I are going to be discussing in this podcast. So, unfortunately, in these bad times of this virus, shows are starting to be postponed and or canceled. So just giving you an update as these shows are announced of being canceled. Again, the 2020 Dells Run and the 2020 Back to the 80s. So in the meantime, let's enjoy this podcast. Thank you. All right, welcome back. This is our podcast number 6. We were on a little bit of a hiatus, but we're back. We had some technical issues, but we're going strong now again. So, podcast number 6, we're going to chat with the president of the Minnesota Fieros Forever, Rob Bartlett. Again, this is a seasonal podcast, but the content that I've got booked, I think this is going to turn into a monthly podcast, which I think will work out really well. Again, today's guest is Rob Bartlett. He's the president of the Minnesota Fiero. You can find our podcasts and some of the future podcasts that we're doing on our website under the videos tab. And then we're in the middle of the page. Just click on FieroCast, and then it'll take you to all the casts that we've done. Some of the future ones that we've got coming up are the original Fiero owners. You don't have to have owned your car from the start. If it was passed down to you from a grandparent or a parent, it will still consider you an original owner. And we have many first-time owners that have purchased their car from the dealership, and they have a lot of past stories and everything that they like to share with everybody. We're also going to talk up to the ladies of N.I.F.E and see how the women like everything that the husbands or significant others do with their Fiero, and get the true story of how much time is actually spent with the cars versus, just a few minutes. We're going to have some tech discussions, and we're going to talk to the group who put together the enthusiast guide of the Pontiac Fiero. And we're also going to talk with a group that helped start the Midwest Fiero Clubs. That one we're probably going to try to do in the same time the Dells Run, depending on how many of the group shows up for that. And again, it's just something fun that we're just going to keep chatting about. So again, you can find us on FieroFocus.com, Fiero Focus Magazine, and our 2 Facebook pages, N.I.F.E and Fiorama. All right, let's get started. Rob, welcome. And,
thanks, Mike.
He's actually remote up in Minnesota, and I'd say the weather's probably pretty horrible, but you said you got some 50, 60 days coming up.
That's right. We've actually got a nice little bit of a warm spell here this spring, and we're enjoying it for every moment we can.
Nice. Yeah, it's March, so don't want to trust the weather too much.
That's right. We have a fool's spring, and that's probably what we've got right now. Is we get lulled into that sense of spring, and then we're going to get dumped on again with more snow and a blizzard here.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we're going to Florida in a week, so let's keep that snow and heavy rain and all that stuff a little bit low. It's 87 degrees down there next time.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Yeah. So, all right. So, give us a little bit of background of life in Minnesota besides the up and down of the heat wave that you guys are having.
Minnesota's a wonderful place. We've got kind of the best of everything. We've got the hot, we've got the cold, we've got beautiful falls, we've got really strong seasons, and it definitely takes a bit of a hardy type to really want to be here year round. But it makes for a really great community and a really great area.
How do the cars deal? Like, do you guys have to prep them a certain way because of the harsh winters?
Absolutely. We've got some of the worst winters around, and certainly the Fieros, for the large part, get tucked away, put into storage, stabilize them, cover them, clean them, stuff them away for the winter stuff. Our daily drivers are the things of remote starts and block heaters and anything we can do to keep them going. Unfortunately, MnDOT does put salt on our roads, so if you can get 10, 15 years out of a winter car without having it rust, you're doing a pretty good job with it.
Exactly. What kind of stuff do you have to do in order to prep it, or when do you start prepping? Like for us down here in Illinois, it's probably like start of October, mid-October, and then we usually keep them hidden until maybe April.
Yeah, I'd say we're probably pretty similar to that. Most people probably early October. I mean, we don't have a real threat of snow until typically the end of October. We've had some pretty significant stuff. But yeah, that's I would say October to April is not uncommon for most people.
Ah, okay. How long have you been involved with the Fiero or an automotive enthusiast?
Well, I grew up. My dad has always been a huge automotive enthusiast. He, was building old school hot rods, and I grew up to stories of his '34 Ford coupe with a Buick motor in it, and all kinds of great stories like that. So I grew up very much in that environment, and we go to car shows and drag races and things like that. As far as Fieros go, my dad purchased his first one in 1989. He purchased his second one in 1991, and that is actually the silver 88 GT that I now own. So we've kind of been part of the community ever since he picked up that, for sure, the second one, maybe even the first one.
Nice. Yeah, it's kind of like me and my grandfather. He was into the Model A's, Model T's, and he did all these parades and cruise nights with it. And he was also an artist, so he kind of gave me my background in cars and graphic design. So,
that's very cool.
Yeah, it's weird how parents and grandparents play a big role in that too.
Absolutely. One of my favorite stories about my dad is that when I was 16, I had my what is now my green Fiero that most people know me for, and the alternator went out. And Dad, my alternator's out. Can you help me with this? He said, sure. And he handed me some tools and said, there you go. And it was definitely a steep learning curve for me that day. I learned that if your alternator bracket's not in good shape, when you put it back together, it's going to break and you get to do the whole job again.
Yeah. But you know what? You learn too.
I did. And I'm really good at alternators.
Awesome. What? So now getting involved with the club. When did you get involved with the club at first?
The first real memories I have from club activities were actually going to the FOCOA Nationals starting in 1993. We attended the Nationals in 93, 94, 5, and 6. So that was 2 in Michigan and 2 in Indianapolis. And those were the trips where I really got to meet a lot of the other club members and actually got to really know these people. And some of these people are still part of the club today. So they've been a huge part of building the community and keeping that community together.
You just said about the distance. Is it difficult to get so many people that have the same idea and involved in clubs, involved in the Fiero, and even like your membership? Because of the size of the state, is it hard to get everybody together or do things?
It certainly can be a challenge. The bulk of our members are certainly around the Minneapolis metro area, at least within probably an hour or two around that circle, and that does compose most of our group. We do have outstate people that we certainly have people up from the Detroit Lakes, northern area, that come down on a surprisingly regular basis to come to events and even meetings with us. But it can be a challenge to get the people from the outstate areas involved. It's definitely a lot of distance to cover if you need to.
Nice. So going to the club, what's your website, Facebook? Do you guys, what's the main way to communicate with you guys as a club?
Sure, we do have an active website at mnfieros.org. It's kind of just a general overview of the organization itself, and then we do most of our communication through our Facebook page. If you just search for Minnesota Fieros Forever Car Club, you can certainly find us there. We're pretty responsive, but that's where all of our shows and events and typical things come up. We also hold monthly meetings. We've always done the third Monday of every month, 7 o'clock. These days we're meeting at a local GMC dealership. They let us use a conference room.
How come, no, me interrupt you, how come on Mondays?
That was something that actually started in the club before me. It's always been on Mondays, and it's just something that we've kind of hung on to. I think people have largely cleared their schedules for it, and they just expect it.
Do you get a good attendance with being on Mondays?
Yeah, in general, we do. I'd say certainly during the winter months, people tend to not arrive quite so regularly, but our typical attendance is anywhere between, I'd say, 10 and 20 people.
Okay. Probably jumping ahead here, but what type of, what do you discuss in the meetings? Different topics? Do you have like a show and tell?
The meetings themselves, we do a rough outline of parliamentary procedure type things, go through financial balances and income, outgoing expenses, those types of things to kind of breeze through business real quick. And then a lot of it's looking at upcoming shows, what we're planning. It takes a lot to go into our big summer show that we'll chat about a little later. That takes up a fair amount of time. And then, it's after that, kind of the meeting after the meeting, we all go to Perkins across the highway for dinner, and that's where the real stuff happens. That's the fun, the what's going on, and the real behind the scenes stuff. That's where
Gotcha.
The fun is.
When did the club form, and do you remember, or do you still have a working relationship with the founding partners?
Yeah, so the club actually is celebrating 30 years this month. So it was
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. That's a huge milestone for us. So the club was originally founded by Rick Balthazar and Pete Gross in March of 1990. At least that was when they held their first meeting. They did a little bit before that. Rick is now a Fox Buddy guy. He's still active in the car communities in the area, but we really don't see him involved with any Fiero stuff. Pete Gross is, of course, still a regular attendee at all of our events, and he is our club secretary, so he handles all the meeting-to-meeting documents and business and that type of thing. So he is still regularly involved, and he's there. He's kind of our cornerstone of the club. He's always been there.
Nice. What were some of the main goals that they had started that you guys keep up with, or have you adjusted the way the day-to-day operations go based on the different demographics of today's society and the different groups, the age groups that own Fieros now?
Well, the goal of the club has always been about creating awareness for the car, within the local car communities, kind of the partnership, the participation with the group, just building friendship, and also kind of backing that up with some technical information and connecting people to the right resources. So the goal of the club is still really the same. How we communicate that has certainly evolved over the years. Initially, the club used to do a regular newsletter. I believe it was actually monthly for quite some time, and slowly it kind of slowed down to bi-monthly or quarterly. And a number of years ago, we determined that between Facebook and the forums and things like that the newsletter was feeling a bit redundant for our group. So we did cease to do that. And now actually in place of that, we do a kind of an annual either yearbook or calendar type of thing for our members to, show off some of the stuff that we did and remind people that we're around and still want them to participate.
Okay. Do you find that more people are communicating with you guys through Facebook now?
Absolutely. Facebook is definitely, I think, the number one communication point certainly for new members coming in. It's the easiest way for people to find us. We do still get some feedback through the website itself, but definitely Facebook is the number one point of contact.
Yeah, I think that has evolved as one of the most informational and point of contact for a lot of organizations nowadays.
Absolutely.
Do you find that you get a lot of communication from, I would say, maybe within like a 50-mile radius of where the main hub is based versus an extended out I know what the furthest we go out is to Freezy, and I mean that's a good distance from where you are. Is there a lot of people in that kind of 150, 200 plus range?
There's not a lot. There's a handful, but the people that are regulars from the outer distances are definitely diehards. One of our members was a huge collector just outside of Frazee up in Detroit Lakes, and he had an amazing collection and was is still to this day a great connection in that area. And then we have people like Marty Legess, who lived outside of Rochester. They're certainly outside of the Minneapolis metro area, but they're still very active. And
you see him at the Dells every year.
Absolutely, he's closer to the Dells than the rest of us. But yeah, he's definitely a core part of our group. And even people know Kevin Lindeman. Kevin lives about an hour outside of town, so he's not exactly a next door neighbor, but we still trek out there or drag him in whenever we can.
Oh yeah, he's a good core part of your club too. So.
Absolutely, he's one of the best.
Yeah. As the current president of Minnesota Fiero, how do you see the club moving forward, 2020, 2021, and beyond?
These days, a lot of our time and efforts are actually focused into our Back to the 80s car show and event. It's definitely become a focal point of a lot of what we do, and it's a great way for us to get the Fiero in front of people that aren't necessarily going to see it or recognize it in other places. We're also encouraging a lot more participation within kind of the local car community. Minneapolis or Minnesota does have the Minnesota Car Enthusiasts Club that is doing a great job of bringing people together from all different kinds of car cultures and eras. And, we can park the Fiero next to some crazy lowriders at those shows, and it's a great place to meet and interact with those other people and, spread the word about the Fiero among the community as well as learn about other stuff ourselves.
Do you see, when you became president, first question part of that is, why did you become club president? What was your the fire behind that? And do a lot of people see you as the president, or do they see you as your average, everyday, Fiero-loving car enthusiast?
For the first part of that, I'm not sure what fire there was to become president. It was kind of a natural evolution. I'd been VP for quite a while in the club, and I think it was just kind of a cycle of bringing in new people and kind of moving board members around a little bit. And I wouldn't say that reluctant is probably the right term, but it's one of those things that sometimes you just feel called to do and know that, hey, these are the people that I'd love to be with, and these are the people that I'm willing to put in the time and the hours and the effort to try to continue moving this group forward, and that I feel like I can do that.
Do you ever feel like you feel burned out? So like we did a podcast with Jim, the president of the Northern Illinois Fiero Enthusiasts, and he said about every 10 years he takes a sabbatical for a year. And it just helps him recharge, step back, pay more attention to the outside life of the president, and just kind of relax a little bit and have more fun. What's your thoughts on that? Do you do that?
I can definitely relate to that you definitely reach a point where you feel like maybe you've pushed a little too far for a little too long in the position. And I guess I honestly couldn't tell you how many years I've been president at this point, but there are certainly days or months or weeks that I feel like I should take a break and step back. And the board is great about supporting that when we need to get away from it for a little bit, and hopefully spend some time. A little garage therapy goes a long way that way.
Oh yeah. Do you have a good core behind you that if you wanted to take like a 6-month off, where you would still kind of be part of the informational part, but not the day-to-days of operation? So do you feel comfortable with your board just having fun and you kind of like seeing the back end of everything?
Absolutely. Certainly, as we've gotten into putting on a bigger car show, we realized that those events are not actually for us. It's a tremendous amount of work. There are, late nights and early mornings and, crazy amounts of time that are invested into that. And our payoff is hopefully seeing the enjoyment of the people around us. And certainly the board that we work with, everybody's volunteers and they put in a lot of time and effort. And I'm sure that if I said, hey, I need to take a break for a little bit, they'd be behind me on that.
Yeah, you make a good point. Everybody that is part of a club, and I mean, if you look at all the Fiero clubs in the Midwest and even on the East Coast, everybody works so freaking hard. And a lot of people are like, oh, this is a paid position. No, we're all volunteer.
That's right.
Everything is volunteer.
That's right. If anything, we put in our own money to accomplish things behind the scene that people don't ever think of.
Yeah. You work your 40-hour week, and you can spend another 40 hours working for the club.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes down time for the anniversary shows.
Oh, yes. Yes. Those are exhausting, too.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah. What do you see more of in your club as far as styles of Fieros? Restored, stock, project, custom, modified?
Certainly when I started getting involved in the club in the early to mid-90s, there was definitely a heavier focus on stock cars. Not that modified or custom cars were looked down upon, but that there was a heavy stock focus. But certainly as the years have gone on, there are still a couple of people in the club that have some really great stock vehicles, really hardcore into that type of a, collector and survivor type setting. But certainly I think the number of people with modified and custom cars, and definitely I see it in the younger people coming into the club, that they're not really as interested in keeping that car bone stock. They want to personalize it, make it their own. Sometimes it's little things, sometimes it's crazy, wild things. So we like to see all of it, but yeah, it's definitely trended from stock to being more custom and modified these days.
I agree. And you have your enthusiasts where they just want to keep it stock, and some you will even go as far as a full body, off body restoration.
Yeah, they can go either way, and I'm a big fan of the idea of doing both. So my silver car, although it's a little bit on the custom side at the moment, is slowly working its way back to being as stock as I can make it. Whereas my green car has always been trending the other direction. There's not going to be barely a nut or bolt stock on that when it's done.
Yeah, very, very nice. All right, we're going to take a break real quick, and we're going to learn about Rodney Dickman and what he offers for the Fiero community. Everyone's heard of Rodney Dickman. Everybody's purchased parts and other things from Rodney Dickman. But did you know he now has brand new undercarriage coolant tubes? Well, let's give a little backstory. The replacement undercar coolant tube story started back in 1984 when the Fiero first hit the streets. Some Fiero owners eventually needed replacement undercar coolant tubes. Many times the problem started at the repair shops. They put the pads under the tubes, and as the car was lifted, it dented and or crushed most of the tubes along as it was being lifted. After they were no longer available from GM, if they even ever were, one could only search for a good one at a junkyard or somebody else who has some of the parts. Good used ones could be found, but if you did, they were too large to ship. The post office, FedEx, UPS wouldn't even ship them, not even Greyhound. Another problem was the undercarriage corrosion under the clamps. A big problem in the 84 to 87 was that they go up and over the front suspension. Even if you put the 84-87 up on the rack, you still had to maneuver around the front suspension. Sometimes you even had to remove the front suspension. So, Rodney Dickman had been asked many times over the past 20 plus years for replacement coolant tubes. His response was, I was always told the same thing. Good ones and used ones are out there, but they're too big to ship. So, fast forward to today, and you will still find that good ones are now very difficult to find, and when you find them, still hard to ship. So, the only idea that Rodney Dickman had was he contacted a few Fiero people that have worked on parts and or parted out Fieros. They talked, and all these new undercar coolant tubes, they told him, these tubes are generally never damaged where they bend inward behind the front wheels and go forward. The damage is always along the sides and the back. So, Rodney Dickman developed these repair kits. You can cut your existing tubes and install this 304 stainless steel repair section. So, this thorn in everyone's side now on these coolant replacement tubes is now a thing of the past. To order one, you can visit www.rodneydickmanaccessories.com. Try them out. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. All right, we're back. Now we're going to talk to you about the Minnesota Fieros Forever going to the Dells. The Dells has been going on for, I think, almost 26 years. I think this year is the 26th year that Tom and the boys up in Wisconsin are putting their show on. Over the years, the prominent show of the Midwest, the Minnesota Fieros Forever have attended the Midwest Regionals Dell Show run. What started that trek to the show for you guys?
Well, really, the Dell's run originated when Tom called Pete and said, hey, why don't you guys come down for a cruise? So it was originally a small gathering of people from Minnesota that came down. They met at the pizza pub, had a good time, and that was really the origin of Dell's. And as the event grew and became more popular, everybody just latched onto it. It's definitely one of the highlights of the year. And, you know, the odd year that we haven't had the Dells run for scheduling conflicts, it's almost like people are lacking a little direction. Like, when does summer start? We didn't have Dells run. Mm-hmm. So it's just such a core event. It's a core product. And for a lot of us these days, it's not even about the cars anymore. It's about going down there to see our friends that's where we go to see them.
Yeah, and it's even a show now where you bring the family. I remember when I first started going back in, I think it was 98, you didn't have families that went. It was you, your car, and that was it. And now I think that the core group, I'll say it, has grown, has got married, had kids, and it's now as much as their show as it is our show.
That's right. We're growing up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the dynamic with the families around has evolved along with, I think, the resort itself. Chula Vista went from being kind of the small edge of town backwoods resort to now being one of the full-blown water parks that is an attraction that people go just for that.
Yeah, I miss those cabins.
Yeah, they were neat. They were neat. But yeah, it definitely is a new look on it that way. We have not actually brought our kids to the show other than on show day to, show them around. And my dad would come down to, let Charlie wander around the show field a bit. So it's still kind of our adult getaway at the moment. But we have talked about bringing, and then we've brought them to Dells for other non-Fiero weekends. Oh, yeah. But we do definitely have the kids involved up here. They're boots on the ground in our events.
Nice. How many, if you can narrow it down to 5, what are your 5 best memories of that show? Or the weekend? I'll put it the weekend.
Yeah, the weekend's definitely the way to look at that. We, hold on a second. Sorry, I lost my headphones there. But yeah, the weekend's awesome. Probably 5. I don't know. Let's see. Definitely the time we spent at the go-kart track was both entertaining and violent at the same time. I know we all had a great time out there. Certainly, the first time I had the chance to drive Jimmy's V8 small block car from the go-kart track,
Nice.
and then getting to see Jen break it shortly after that. She'll tell you I did, but it was definitely her. Let's see. I mean, a lot of it's just social time. Some of the great cruises. Boy, the state park, Devil's Lake State Park down there is just an amazing drive. That's one of my favorite places to take the Fiero. And things like the being introduced to the Wollersheim Winery, which I'm certain was through a N.I.F.E event down there, it's again another one of our favorite places to go. All these events over the years have evolved into places you got to go and things you got to do while you're down there. It's all great.
Well, I'm going to let something slip real quick, and if anybody's listening, just cover your ears. We're actually thinking of going back to the Worcestershire Winery this year on Friday afternoon.
Awesome. I'm in on that one for sure.
So we're in the early stages of the planning, but I think we're going to be going back there. That place is very nice. And
It
got
is.
some
It
great
is.
wine. So
Yes, you always leave with at least a half a case or so.
Exactly. You're talking about social events, and the Dells is a very social event, but an odd thing happens at night, and maybe you can kind of fill me in on what exactly this is. I have heard of it, but I haven't participated in it yet. Everybody keeps asking me.
You haven't been there?
I have not been there. I have not.
Well, our little social gathering, as we might call it, unfortunately was nicknamed at some point the Circle of Shame, which I have to admit was entertaining for a couple of years. We're growing a little weary of the name, but the purpose really is that, to find ourselves getting together in the parking lot. And really it originated, I remember the early days of going to the Dells, everybody would hang out in the bar. At night, everybody would go into the bar and kind of pile in there and hang out. And definitely some of us in the younger crowd who didn't necessarily have the budget to go in the bar to have a good time decided that we just hang out outside. And we had done a couple of parking lot-based events, such as we did a parking lot poker game where people had to go from car to car and collect cards and build a poker hand. And after the game was over, we just stayed outside. And it eventually grew into this large group of people. And then the next night, people would ask, hey, where'd that group of people go? And it just kind of became a thing where we would, and it wasn't necessarily planned. There wasn't a location. It was where the people gathered, and people were drawn to that just for that social aspect. And there definitely was a recognizable amount of social lubrication, which definitely enhances that crowd a lot. But I think it was a really great way for attendees and even for people that we've known for years there to really kind of relax and be themselves and just have a good time, being with each other.
Yeah, unwind. Don't have to worry about anything else. Just sit there and chat till the wee hours of the morning.
That's right. No email digging on phones, because back then there was no Wi-Fi out there. And,
so most of the time this happens outside, right?
Yes.
What happens if it rains?
If it rains, we have taken over various locations inside Chula Vista, sometimes to their pleasure, sometimes not. We've never actually been kicked out of any specific area, but we have been relocated within the resort. Hey, stop blocking this hallway. Why don't you guys use this empty conference room? And that worked well for us. So rain or shine, there's always fun to be had.
Yeah, it does get pretty busy. You've got country line dancing, you've got weddings, you've got, I think there was even a bar mitzvah when there 1 year. So, but the big thing is the country line dancing.
That's right. The line dancers, I'm not sure if they like us or not. I can never quite tell.
We can commingle.
That's right.
Yeah, they have yet to see Fiero people dance.
Maybe for the better.
Exactly. But yeah, this year it's May 29th, 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st.
Yes.
So, and I think it will be another great show, and it's A lot of the same people go, but it's family. Everybody knows everybody.
That's right.
Like
That's right. I'm looking forward to seeing you there.
Exactly. Me too. Yeah. I'll be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the family's coming too. So
nice.
It'll be nice. They'll be at the water park most of the day on Saturday. I think they were going to do the ducks as well. So
very cool.
They're looking forward to it. There's a lot of stuff to do up there for family as well. So, but yeah, looking forward to it. And hopefully after everybody goes to bed, I'll be able to make my first Circle of Shame because it's now on the agenda. So
we got to change the name of that. Yes. We got to change the name.
Maybe everybody could vote this year for a new one.
That's right. And just so you know, there have been President Jim Holman sightings.
Really?
Not necessarily in the circle, but certainly hovering around the edge. You know, he observes most of the time.
You got to pull him a chair and say, here you go.
Yep.
Yeah. It really interested to see just some of the conversations that happened in there, too, because I remember when I first saw it, I think it was, like 10 people, and now it's like, 20, 30 people?
At least. There have been some groups that have been some of the biggest circles. I couldn't even count the people that were milling around.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to it, and I look forward to that weekend as a whole, too. So
absolutely, me too.
So moving a little bit more north now, back into Minnesota, you guys used to have your main event, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it at Wagner's Drive-In?
Yeah, for a time we were at Wagner's Drive-In. Originally, the event in the really early days was actually a spring kickoff show, and it used to take place typically a week or two before Dell's Run, which is really a sketchy time in Minnesota. You can have, 80 degrees and sunshine, or you can have 40 degrees and sleet. So it was really a sketchy time to try to have a show. We did eventually reschedule it for summer, and we would just call it the I can't even remember. But yeah, we had a summer show instead. So the Summer Sizzle, there we go. And Wagner's was one of our locations that we ended up at. It's a old school style drive-in burger place. Jim Wagner, who ran the shop, was a huge car guy. During the summers, he would have giant cruise nights with, I couldn't believe they'd put 100+ cars into these parking lots. But yeah, we'd show up with our 20 to 30 cars and have a good time. And, it was right on the edge of a main highway. People had great visibility there. So it was really a fun event to have.
Very nice. How long did you guys have it?
Oh, we were at Wagner's probably for about 6 years or so. And then we kind of hopscotched a few other places before that. Anything from, I guess the very last Summer Sizzle we had was actually at a public park in Eden Prairie. Prior to that, we'd had it on the top level of a parking garage at one time. That was kind of a fun one.
Yeah.
And yeah, we just kind of bounced around the city looking for other places. In the early days, one of our members owned a go-kart track and fun arcade kind of place, and that was one of my favorite places to have the event because I love, again, the go-karts.
Did you? I know it was open to all Fieros. How many different clubs came up? I know Tom Schmidt's been up there. Jim has gone up there Fiero-less.
Yeah, he came up in a Pontiac, but it was not a Fiero. Tom Schmidt was definitely a regular. Tom Pasinski would come up from time to time. We'd occasionally see other people from Illinois or from Iowa and Wisconsin. We draw a few people from North or South Dakota, but it wasn't a real far-reaching type event. We would certainly try. We'd invite people and try to plan for them to be there, but it never was a giant draw.
Did they enjoy it while they were up there? Did they just come up from the show, or did they come up for like a nice weekend?
Most of the time people would come up for the weekend. We would have them up for dinner the night before in a local restaurant, and just some great social time that way. I know Jerry and Judy Goodwin came up one time, and we had a great time hosting them around the area. And
that's a drive. They came from Indiana.
Yeah, they did. And the car made it all the way there to the hotel, but not to the show. So we picked him up at a gas station down the road and at least brought him to the show, and the car was fixed by the time they needed to go. So we had them there to enjoy the time at least.
Awesome. did you guys outgrow those locations, or what was it before you jumped into the back to the 80s? Did you see that you wanted to go in a different direction, or did you see that the current Fiero show just, I don't want to say stalled, but is it something that you guys looked hard at before jumping into the back to the 80s?
Yeah, that was a huge deal. After being at Wagner's for quite a few years, we tried out a couple more locations. So there was probably 2 years in between Wagner's and back to the 80s, and it was kind of I'd had back to the 80s in my head for probably 7 to 10 years at that point, and it was St. Paul is the host of the Back to the 50s car show, which is the largest car show in the United States, and it's draws 15,000 people from all over the country.
Wow.
And a lot of times it would fall on or near the same weekend that we would have our summer show. And so as always, I'd see advertisements and think, when I was a kid in the 80s, that, those 50s cars were 30 years old. And here we are in the 2000 somethings, and our 80s cars are 30 years old. So it's kind of that same distance of nostalgia and being able to be at that age where, hey, maybe I can go back and buy that F body I liked when I was a kid. Things like that kind of were the trigger point. But it came down for me to it literally was the meeting after the last summer show that we had, where I really just had to ask the board and the members that were present at the meeting and say, hey, this is an idea I've talked to some of you about it before. I need everybody else's support because I know I can't do it by myself. And if they were not going to be able to be behind me for that movement, then I wasn't even going to try. But everybody said, hey, you know what? Let's do it. Let's try it. Let's kind of break down those borders a little bit. And some of it was, I wouldn't say that it fell off, but I do feel like the Fiero specific shows for us became a little bit, I don't know if stagnant's the right word, but it's a little bit steady where it was the same 30 or so people, the same cars. We were still having a good time doing it, but we weren't necessarily seeing anything new. And aside from a few people pulled in off the street, we weren't really getting out there. We weren't being introduced or in front of anybody else. Mm-hmm. So changing gears into the back to the 80s was, we're going to create this event and invite everyone. We want everyone to show up at the show. And it's not for Fieros specifically. We'll have a great presentation there, great representation, but we don't even talk about MFF as being the host of the show in a very direct way. People know us as back to the 80s, and they know that there's a lot of Fieros there. They don't always connect the two together.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, we're going to get more into that in a second. We're going to take a little break and introduce the Fiero store. We all know how hard it is to find Fiero parts. We also know that as the years go by, finding parts isn't getting any easier. The big box stores will never make new Fiero parts because the community is just too small. This is why we need the support, or we need to support the companies who support us. For nearly 30 years, the Fiero store has sponsored our club events, provided free technical support, and produced well over 150 exclusive parts that no big box store would even consider. So next time you need parts, head over to thefierostore.com and browse through thousands of products that are specifically designed for your Fiero. That's FieroStore.com, the world's largest source of Fiero parts.
And I got to give a shout out to the Fiero store for their awesome t-shirt selection right now. They've got one that's got a beautiful silver GT with some gold wheels on it. You should definitely go out and buy that t-shirt.
I heard about that, and I heard about that nice little blanket too.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a very cool blanket, by the way.
Thanks. Sam's Club is my friend right now.
So let's go back to the 80s here. Let's go back about 30 years. Did it take 30 years to set up, or how far in advance did you have to start planning for something like this?
Well, as I mentioned before, I thought about it for a long time, so I kind of had an idea in my head. And we've hosted, between our own little show and my participation in some of the bigger shows.
Question. Hold on. Time
out. Yeah. Sure, go ahead.
Did you fall off hanging a picture off the toilet and bump your head?
No, but that would have been a brilliant backstory. I might have to use that for my next podcast.
There you go.
We love our DeLorean friends. Shout out to rentdelorean.com.
Yeah, very cool. Every time I see it in pictures, I'm like, that's like almost to like I would say looking at pictures, but not up close. That's like to the T.
Oh, it is. It is. Andy has just an amazing attention to detail when it comes to that car.
Yeah.
So yeah, as far as setting up the show, we decided pretty much June, the year before the first show, that we were going to do it. And I spent a weekend out of town visiting family where I pretty much hung out on a computer and did the initial branding, website, Facebook page, and kind of laid the groundwork for the look that became Back to the 80s. And we just kind of hit the ground running from there. So that was June. We started pulling in a lot of interest right away. The car community in the area loved the idea. We opened up registration for the show just after the turn of the year. And my goal the first year, I said, hey, if we get 100 cars in the first year, I think that would be amazing. And by the time the show came around in June of 2017, we had almost 220 cars the first year.
Pre-registered or just at the show?
At the show, we had 170 or so pre-registered.
Wow.
And the rest came the day of the show.
Very cool. Where is the show held?
So the show now is at the Burnsville Center. Burnsville is a southern suburb of Minneapolis where 35E and W come together to become the 35 everybody south of here knows. It's kind of a throwback location. It was something I drive by every day in my daily commute, and actually saw them hosting a small carnival-style event and thought, you know what? That'd be a great tie-in for Back to the 80s. I mean, where did you go hang out in the 80s? At the mall. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to mall management. They got back to me right away, and we're just love the idea. I mean, we're bringing people to the mall again. That's a tough thing to accomplish these days.
Yeah, I would love to have. I think there's one around here in Chicago somewhere, but it's a 80s style arcade, and everything is quarters. No digital, nothing. It's all true 80 authentic arcade.
Yeah, we actually have a new gold sponsor for the event this year that is Rent My Arcade, and he's a local guy, runs his own little company where he buys, restores, rents, and sells original arcade games.
Wow!
So he is going to bring out a tent full of as many arcades as he can stuff in there for our event. We're really excited to have him out there. Yeah.
Very cool. I'm gonna geek for a second. I went to Chicago's E2 or C2E2 convention this past weekend, and they had probably a quarter of the floor was all vintage arcade, but they were all like updated to current now. So it was all scan your phone, you get 4 credits, and it was all LED screens. So it was kind of weird because you didn't have the authenticness of the pixels. It was a very smooth transition and a very, very clean, like 3-dimensional game. So it was cool to play like some Pac-Man and Galaga, but it lost some of that 80s because you're back to the pixels back then.
That's right.
Now it's like I couldn't. I had to stop playing.
Yeah. That's part of the joy of that old stuff, like plugging in the old Nintendo. Mm-hmm. It's not exactly the same when you plug it into your 50-inch high def 4K TV.
Exactly.
It takes some of the old technology to really make that stuff feel authentic still.
Yeah. What'd you say is the average draw over the past 3 or 2 and 3 years? Yeah.
17, this will. Yeah. So I would say in general we're drawing somewhere between 200 to 250 cars to the event. We did have one year where we pretty much held the event in a monsoon, and we still had about 170 cars show up that day. So even our participants are pretty hardcore about making this event happen, even when the weather is so terrible. Participation wise, we last year partnered for the first time with actually the city of Burnsville, who brought out a food truck festival in conjunction with the show. And they're growing their participation again this year as well. So we figured we probably had somewhere between, I'd say, 1,500 and 2,000 spectators at the show throughout the day. It was a really serious crowd the whole time.
Very cool. Very cool. Is it just open to production 80s? How do you guys 80 to 89?
Sure. Our classification is anything that was built into the 80s. So if you had a car that started in 78, 79, and that body style continued, that counts as an 80s car. And the same thing on the other end of the spectrum. If that body style started in 88, 89, and then continued into the early 90s, like the third gen F body is a good example where that body style went into 93-ish or so. If it fits that body style, that's really what we're looking for.
Okay.
And then this year we kind of tried to start expanding that a little bit more, in that if the car was prototyped or presented or released to the public at an auto show in the 80s, the two examples that really were prominent this year were the Miata and the NSX, which were both released at the same Chicago Auto Show in 1989. We're like, you know what? Those were developed in the 80s. Let's bring those out too. So we're really pretty flexible on that stuff. We've got some earlier cars that show up that some people question, but if we can justify it, then that's great. We'll take them. You know, it's not a super serious event. We want people to come out and have a good time.
So that's very cool. What about TV movie cars?
We love our TV movie cars. We've had great participation. We mentioned Andy from Rent DeLorean, who brings out his basically movie prep DeLorean. It's a beautiful, beautiful car. We've also had the Minnesota Ghostbusters Club. We've got one of our friends, Kurt, has a Dodge Charger, a Dukes of Hazzard car that comes out. Nate Anderson locally has a beautiful kit replica that he's, I believe, going to have the interior done on this year as well.
Nice.
So yeah, we definitely love the movie cars. They're a big draw for people, really popular. You know, it's just a great attention grabber for people.
What's one movie car or TV car that you would love to have show up?
I really want somebody to come up with an A-Team van. I think that would be great.
That is a great. I got a model. I could bring the model.
You can definitely bring the model.
Is it for now going a little bit into the show? Is it participation or judged? How do you guys operate that?
It is almost entirely participation voting. We do have a popular vote system that's pretty basic. We kind of tinkered with it a little bit over the years, but the past few years is you vote for your top, I believe we're doing top 10 votes, and then we tally everything and just award by classes. Classes are kind of in flux until the last minute because participation is what's driving that. We do have a handful of choice awards that are also voted on or selected by the Burnsville Center hosting us or things like that. But it's generally a popular vote system.
Do you have classes, or is it just open?
We have been doing classes. The initial classes were kind of a simple import and domestic division. Since then, we've split that to Asian and European imports. We're trying to figure out the right way to split up domestic, because you either end up with a ton of classes or not enough classes. So that's always kind of in flux a little bit. We're going to do a new special interest class this year for some of those really oddball things. A good example, we had an RV show up last year that's called a Vixen. It's definitely worth looking up on the internet. It's a very interesting RV. People loved it, but it didn't really fit into, we had a truck class, didn't really even fit into that class. So for things like that, and for the Lamborghini Countach replica built on a Fiero that showed up that we may or may not have given a European award to, for those types of things, we want to do a special interest class just to recognize them a little more independently. We also did do a class last year for captive import, which is where companies like Mitsubishi would partner with Dodge to bring in something like the Dodge Colt. So that was kind of another subdivision that we created to try to spread things out a little bit.
Do you have any participation from like local car companies as far as dealerships? Do they kind of bring in more, maybe a modern, like a Dodge Charger and kind of put it next to the other Dodges, or do you kind of sway away from that?
We've reached out to some of the local dealerships, but haven't. I mean, we had some modest interest, but nobody really bit into that. So we're still trying to connect to the right people at the dealerships. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where after the event, you'll talk to somebody. Oh yeah, that's great. We'd love to do that, and then you can't find them next year.
What would you say is the most prominent car style that shows up?
There isn't any one make or model that dominates. I mean, by numbers, Fiero is the strongest thing that's there because we kind of pre-fill the parking lot with all of our volunteer cars. But outside of that, it's a pretty even spread. Even just within the quality or the style of the cars, we have people that show up with beautiful race prepped show car, drag cars, just some immaculate fabrication work. And we have people that show up with literally barn finds. We've had people drag cars out of the barn to the first show and everything in between. But one of the things that I like the most is watching people react to the nostalgia of a car that they knew when they were a kid. And sometimes it's the Chevy Citation or something like that, a Chevy Chevette or some oddball car like, oh yeah, I got one of those from my grandma and that thing was awesome. And my friends and I used to go drive it in the field in the mud, and just they instantly go back to that time. And that's really what the show is about, is remembering the fun, cool things about the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was 10. Yeah. That was between 8, 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there.
Yeah, so. Yep. Yeah, I think definitely people look at me and think that I was probably a bit young for being kind of the person in front of an 80s event, which I might be. I was born in 79, by the way.
78. Actually, right on the border.
That's right.
December of 78.
There you go. I was January 79. So, but yeah, I grew up actually with a cousin who was, probably 12, 14 years older than I was, being around quite a bit. And he drove a Chevy Monza with a small block in it, thing dressed up like a drag car. He had an 85 Toyota pickup. We listened to Queen and Styx and all that music. And that really is how I grew up with such a heavy interest in the 80s, even though I'm probably more of a 90s kid.
And we grew up with a great music. The people now don't know what's going on.
That's right.
What with taking this big endeavor, what would you say are some of the big pros and cons of hosting a show this big?
I think the biggest pro is seeing people's reactions afterwards. The number of people that come up to me, even at other events, as we attend other events the rest of the summer. We still wear our Back to the 80s gear. We have bright pink staff shirts, and I may or may not have a Miami Vice costume. But when people see me around town or other staff members, they come up and they only have good things to say. They, hey, that's one of the best or is the best car show. I love that every year. I can't wait to see you guys. When are you doing another event? Just that positive feedback that, we're onto something. Something's working right. And, in the greater scheme of looking at things across the United States a lot of people hear about the Radwood movement or the Radwood effect. And I've talked to Brad over at Radwood. He's a great guy. He's got a heck of an event going on. They've got way more resources than I ever will. And I applaud them for what they're doing. So it's nice to see that there are a lot of us kind of on that same wavelength of, this is a great idea. People love it. People have fun. And let's embrace that.
I agree.
On the con side of hosting a big show, it's a lot of work. I have a really fairly small team of people that do this work. It's hard. I mean, that really comes down to it. It's a lot of hard work, and there are definitely days that I'm talking about, hey, I don't know if I'm going to do this next year. But then again, after the show, people love it, and you're excited again.
Yeah, the same way with us at Fiorama. It's like, you can almost consider it like Thanksgiving. All the work goes into one day and all the prep, and it's like everybody devours it and there's nothing left. And it's like,
yes.
Oh, it's done.
Yes. That's a really great relation. Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear it, but the people, as I'm probably recording, it sounds like somebody's peeing behind me. It's not. It's the humidifier draining into the floor. I don't have soundproofing down here in my man cave, so
You're not recording in the bathroom?
I'm not recording in the bathroom. The microphone is not on when I go to the bathroom.
Thank goodness for all of us.
What brings you guys back every year to do this show?
Oh,
The people?
it really is the people. I've met, and I mean, the Fiero people are great, and I've known them. They're my family. They really are. But we're growing that family with this 80s event, and there are people that, even when I take my kids to the little tiny car show up the street that's only there for a couple hours, I'll definitely run into people that I know. And, the number of people that I've met and that have embraced us both as the 80s group as well as the Fiero group into this greater car community. I mentioned earlier the MNCEC and that my friend Dan that runs that show, that organization, he's been nothing but accepting of us. And that's not something that can be said about a lot of shows for a lot of years.
I agree. You have to have a strong family first that supports you, and word of mouth and that connection just works for a lot of people. And I think you guys done a great job with that show up there.
Thank you.
And I know I say this every year. I say it all the time. I got to get up to you guys' show. I got to get up to the Tyler Shipman show. But you probably agree with me on this. It's hard when you have kids.
It's exceptionally hard when you have kids.
So, and we've got 3. And we got a 6, a 3, and a 1. So
yeah, and the younger they are, the harder that is to work around.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, even a couple of years ago when we went down to Peoria, even that was kind of pushing it with 2. And,
yes.
Now with 3, depending on where the 40th is, it all depends on how long the drive they can handle. So
that's right.
A lot of entertainment. So.
Oh yeah. They need to be patient. And, as they age into it, Charlie is now 11 and a half. And for the last couple of years, actually, he's been really interested in the hands-on side of it. A couple of years ago, we attended Fred's event down in Davenport with the club down there, and they invited him to judge with the judging team.
I remember that.
And he thought that was the greatest thing ever. And he ended up being on one of the judging teams at the 35th as well. And he is one of my top volunteer helpers at Back to the 80s every year. He and my daughter runs around and does stuff, but Charlie pretty much ran the merchandise tent nearly by himself this past year at the show.
Very cool. Yeah. Addison was 5.5 when she'll actually 4.5. So she was going to be 5, and she had a blast. She wanted to hang out with me on Friday night and Saturday night, and then she just got tired, and she's like, "Oh, I'm done." But
that's awesome, though. That's awesome.
I can't drive her in the Fiero, but when we go as a group, a family, she loves hanging out with everybody. So yeah,
that's awesome.
What would you say about moving forward with the 80s? Do you see making changes or keeping it as is and just enjoying it as the ride goes on?
A little bit of both. I like the idea that we've got a location that's now feeling well established. The first year we had it in a different location. It was a unique place. We didn't necessarily, I think our participants had a great time, but as organizers, we kind of struggled with that location. So having moved to the Burnsville Center, being there a few years, we understand what we're up against as far as space and time constraints are. We're really getting embraced by the connection with Burnsville City. They love what we're doing. We love how they're helping us and how they're participating. They want to help grow the event more. So we want to definitely try to always find things that people want to do. And that's one of those things we do after every major show is we open that floor to the public on Facebook. And that's a dangerous thing to do. People love to complain, but we also get some really great, very real feedback. What do people like? What do people not like? What do you want to see more of, less of, those types of things. So we're always trying to absorb that information from our participants and then turn around and apply that to next year's event. And that's really what we're doing this year is we're growing the from the suggestions that they offered, as well as the things that the city is bringing to the table for us.
Do you get a lot of people that offer to volunteer after you see how the show operates?
We get a handful, but not a huge number of people. It's fairly limited. I think people like coming out and enjoying the show, and I think they'd rather turn a blind eye to what it might take to put on a show like that. Mm. But we do have a handful of people that are very enthusiastic about not just showing up. They want to help. They want to be involved, and they're happy to do what we need them to. So we definitely have some people. It's not a big number though.
Yeah, but like I said, I've heard nothing but good things about it, and I will get up there one of these years, and probably just after Emmy gets maybe like a couple years older. But I definitely want to get up there because I've never been to Minnesota. And
what?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
I've driven through, but that's
okay.
it. Like just Wisconsin to South Dakota, boom, right.
So you just cut across. Okay,
just cut across.
Yeah, I've been to Illinois enough that I actually own an iPass.
Yeah, they should have been gone many years ago, but that's a different story.
Now we have MinPass too.
Yeah. But, I want to get to see the Mall of America. I want to see the new Vikings Stadium and a lot of things I want to check out up there. So we'll get up there, and maybe whether it's just a weekend trip or if it's like a week where we Minnesota, South Dakota. So
there you go. Well, let us know when you're coming through town. We'd be glad to have you around here.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Let's move further north. It's a story of love. The Fiero community through Pontiac's Fiero Forum heard a call of help, and it's 11 years now, right? Or more?
This will be the 11th show this year, so it's been 10 years since Tyler. Yes.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about how that call for help to help Tyler get his Fiero back up and running so he can enjoy it.
So the whole story really began with Tyler Shipman joining Pontiac's Fiero Forum and putting up a really fairly basic post of, hey, I'm 17 and have terminal cancer, and I just really would like to see if anybody could help answer some questions to help me get my Fiero running before I'm out of time. And it took some really special people to kind of jump on that on the forum and run with it. And it very rapidly evolved from trying to answer a teenager's questions to let's go help him. Let's go help his family. And a lot of planning went into it, and a team of people went up there and literally in a matter of 24 hours rebuilt his car. And it was through the voluntary donations of people on Pontiac's especially. And we had a number of people that flew in from out of town, from California, from Texas, from Pennsylvania to help make that happen, as well as a number of people from our club itself. They drove up to Frazee. Frazee is about 3 or 4 hours north of the cities here. So it's kind of a northern, almost in the resort towns area up north. So it was a story that was featured on Boyd Hooper's Care 11 Land of 10,000 Stories piece, and I believe it won some awards through that as well. But more importantly, it brought a different Fiero family together. I mean, the Minnesotans have already been a really strong crowd, but to bring those other people in from out of town, through Pontiac's, through the Shipman family, we've all become really, really close to them as well. It really transformed what people do when it comes to things like that.
Yeah, me personally, I remember it very well, and it was during a time where I couldn't take time. I had was laid off prior to that and was working for a company that I just dreaded, but it got us through, and I kept our family together. But I helped by creating window decals. So that was my contribution. Even though I couldn't help out personally, I was able to help out, and I think they used those and they sold them in put the proceeds, help proceed towards the car and all that stuff. So.
Yeah, it was definitely a group effort, even from people that weren't there. I was not part of the original build team myself. I had a 1-year-old son, and my wife was out of town for the weekend. So I remember staying up late at night on my laptop watching the live stream and chatting with people online when I could, and of course supporting the event and then so that took place in November that year. And Tyler did get to drive his car, and he passed away in February the following year. And then that summer, we basically decided to descend upon Frazie's City Festival of Turkey Days, and really ratchet up their car show with a bunch of Fieros and other interesting vehicles. So we definitely brought in some numbers to an event that was previously just a real low-key thing for them.
Going back to when you were talking about the build, what was if I remember, it was like 24 hours from start to finish?
Yeah,
it was
I believe it was
off-body restoration?
Yeah, I believe it was 24 hours. The only thing that was really done in advance was that the body was pulled, and one of the local body shops, who also donated the space they worked in, had already painted the panels. So that was really the only thing that was done in advance. Otherwise, they went through that car top to bottom and fixed or replaced everything. There was an engine swap done probably a couple of weeks after the initial build, went from being the 2.8 to a 3.4 double overhead cam, and that is the engine that's still in that car today.
Yeah, I've seen that a few times, and it runs like brand new. So very impressive how that team started and just built that basically back up from scratch.
Yeah, and the car that to this day now is owned by Tyler's younger brother, Carter, who has become one of the guys while we're up there. We treat him like a brother, and he is one. And he definitely, in the spirit of his brother, drives it like a teenager should.
Were you guys surprised how much support and everything that came up that night?
Yeah, I think that everybody was pretty impressed at the number of people that turned out and the effort that was put in, and all the, whether it was from, busting knuckles, wrenching on the car, or handling the technology and the advertising sides of things and the promotions. And I mean, it was a amazing team effort that just kind of came out of nowhere. It was brilliant. It really was.
What do you I remember pictures, but what was Tyler's reaction when he saw that car coming out of the garage?
I think he was truly speechless and overwhelmed that it was there and that it was real and that these people had come together for him and for his family. Mm-hmm. Daniil and Jay, his mom and dad, are amazing people, and his brother and sister, they've been through so much, and they're growing into amazing adults. And I just, they have a whole new extended family that's proud of them too. So yeah. The community really came together for Tyler on that one.
Yeah. And that is truly what the Fiero community is. We're a big family, and anybody who needs help, we don't shy away. We go and we help, no matter how bad or what we need to do to get it done.
That's right. I think one of the interesting comments I used to see when the original news story came out, it would pop up from time to time on hot rodders forums and things like that. And yes, the Fiero can be a generally unloved vehicle among hot rod guys, but they would always say, "Yeah, I'm not a Fiero guy, but look at the amazing thing these people did."
It's the stories too.
Absolutely.
Well, that's another show I want to get to, and everybody that goes to that every year just says it's a love affair, and it's truly its own family up there too.
It really is. It really is. And the Shipman family has literally opened up their property for those of us that are interested in camping out while we're up there. Certainly in part from a cost-saving standpoint, people had asked about, hey, if I don't want a hotel, what can I do? So they opened up their yard and said, hey, we got space. Come out, throw up a tent, and it's turned into that is the social center of that event is their backyard.
Did they put up a big water slide too one year?
I believe they've done the giant slip and slide a couple years. It's both entertaining and scary at the same time. But at this point they've even taken, I think it was an old chicken coop or something, and built it into an outdoor bathroom and shower for people.
Nice. That's interesting.
It really is. It really is.
Right. All right. Well, it's truly a great story. And if anybody wants to learn more about it, is there a website that they can go to? Is there a donation if they wanted to donate to the show or donate to the family? Because don't they have a charitable donation now for them?
Yeah, you can find out more information at tylershipmanmemorialcarshow.com or look up the Tyler Shipman Memorial Car Show on Facebook. There are links in there for sponsorship, for donations. In the past, for a few years, they did scholarships for other high school students. Since then, they've started a hashtag Pay It Forward for Tyler movement. There's some really great stories about that on their website as well. It's definitely worth checking those things out.
And this is your 11th year, correct?
This will be the 11th year of the show, yes.
Yeah. Right. So if you want more information, please check out those sites. You can also find all the information and a lot more show information through the Midwest Fiero Club's website. And you're saying, what is the Midwest Fiero Clubs? Well, the Midwest Fiero Clubs is a dedicated group of enthusiasts whose passion is to promote and preserve the Pontiac Fiero in the Fiero community. The Midwest Fiero Clubs consists of members from existing Fiero Clubs. The Midwest Fiero Club's intent is to support member clubs and promote Fiero-related events. The MWFC cross-promotes the shows and activities of each club. The intent is to enable enthusiasts to discover events across their area and a wider array throughout other states, and to help participation in the local club events as well. This has been crafted through a tight-knit community of Fiero owners and some great regional shows, and may not have otherwise happened. So everybody comes together to help get these shows back on the map. It's worked. It's been this way since 2004. So you can find more information on their Facebook page and their website, which is now, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, part of the AACA.
That's correct. It's Midwest Fiero Clubs, or AACA.MidwestFieroClubs.com.
So great organization, and it's a great thing to be a part of too. So we'll have more information on that in a future podcast, and hopefully probably around the June range you can get more information on that. So starting to wind down here. The club has been around for a while now. Did you ever think that would happen when you first started with the club, and do you see it going further into the future?
I definitely never really gave any thought to it in the earlier years as a younger person and a participant. I think I kind of took it for granted that the club was just always there and always would be there, and it wasn't until probably the past 10 years that I had to really think about that more. There had been conversations along the way that came up about whether or not we continue with the club and what does the future look like. And it was nice that when that question was posed, there was an overwhelming response of yes, the club will continue. And I think as long as we continue to draw new, younger people, and we've got some really great young new members in the past couple of years here, as long as we can continue that draw, the club will continue and the enthusiasm continues, even if the methods of communication might change.
Do you think that a lot of the behind the scenes that people don't see, the young people, your membership, your board, do you think with that strong commitment that you can get the long-lasting, vibrant club that you start gaining? Because I guess my question is, the Fiero community as a whole is starting to get smaller because the cars are being far and few in between. Do you see that being an issue? And with the strong background that your club holds, promoting it and getting the word out there to keep the young people involved.
Yeah, I definitely think that that is a constant challenge that we have to kind of work with. I think that in the early days, there was a lot of people that we would approach about the Fiero that, it was their daily driver. They didn't look at it other than an appliance. And now when you meet someone, they're hungry for the information. They're enthusiastic from the get-go. If they've got a Fiero, they generally know what it is. They've got it for a reason, and they want that connection. So while I think there are fewer people or fewer cars out there to connect with, I think that when we do make those connections, they're probably more meaningful in a shorter period of time.
I agree. I agree. Moving internally, what does your family think about having you being part of your club and the vast array of the Midwest Fiero clubs? Now that you have two Fieros, so
I think my family is generally pretty accepting. My son is I think probably my biggest champion of the things that we do. He is already looking like he's going to be the future of Fieros. He's, like I said, he's 11 and a half. I taught him to drive stick shift in an 85 GT last fall, and he still thinks that is the coolest thing ever. He's pretty sure he wants to buy that car as soon as he can. And my wife is very, very tolerant and awesome. When we first met, the very first time I did anything with her, I took her in a Fiero, and she likes to tell the story. The first time she came up to my house, she rapidly noticed the roughly 10 Fieros parked in a row next to the shed. And understood that she either had to accept the little car or get out. And clearly she's accepted the little car. And she's a great volunteer when it comes to the events, and is really built her own community among especially the local group as well. It was one of those things. I think she realized, hey, we're going to be spending some time with these people. Maybe I ought to get to know them too. And it's made for some really meaningful connections for her too.
So if we were to ask her to tell the truth versus what we consider the truth, how much time would she say you spend on the Fieros?
I am not sure if she would say not enough, I think she would probably say not enough. I like to refer to it as my garage therapy. And I think she knows that when I get time in the garage to do things, while it might be regularly frustrating out there, that it's better for me in the long run to, the green car's been broken since the, day after the 30th anniversary show, and, slowly making progress on getting that thing back together in a new form. And yeah, I think she's always supportive of that. And I don't think it really is too much of a distraction. I think when it comes to planning big shows, like when we do our work on the, get closer to back to the 80s, or especially with events like the 35th, that she sees the wear and tear that the toll that takes, and the effort that it takes, and maybe has some second thoughts then. But after those events are done, she's always glad to have seen us push through.
It's always good to have that support too. And my wife does the same thing. She's very supportive when it comes to the anniversary shows or even our show. But I mean, for me, most of the time that I spend on the car is after everybody goes to bed, and you have that downtime, quiet time, and you just go to the garage, put some music on, and you just start plugging away.
That's right.
Sometimes I'm like, oh crap, it's 1 o'clock in the morning.
The time goes fast out there sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the funniest part that I had, I want to say it was probably prior to the 35th, the family went up to, I think it was Wisconsin, and there was some type of event going up there, and I stayed behind because I had to work. And Amy said, oh, what are your plans tonight? So I'm going to start working on the seats for the Fiero, put the new leather seats in. And I think I started around 5 o'clock, and everybody told me, putting Mr. Mike's seats in, a couple hours, you'll be done. I think it took me 6 hours per seat. I wound up finishing around like 4 o'clock in the morning.
I remember the first seat always takes a really long time, and the second one takes a little less.
Yeah. But those damn hog clips, that's what got me.
Get the blisters just thinking about those.
Exactly. But yeah, but you have the time, that's the, and the support, that's the best part. So
yeah, absolutely. Without her support, I definitely wouldn't be where I am with the hobby and the community like we are today.
Yeah. Over the years, you've seen people come and go from the club. Is it because they mainly sell the car, or like with our club, people just get old and they still love the car, but they just can't maneuver in and out? Do you see a lot of that up north too?
We definitely do. Certainly, seeing the Fiero community age is a challenge for us. I think that's true of every Fiero club that's been around for a number of years. That those people, we can't slow that down. We can't stop it. So it's definitely a challenge that way. We actually, an interesting story. We had a local person who was not a longtime member, but who reached out to the club. She had an 85 GT that she had owned since 1986. It was a gift from her father. So it was effectively a one-owner car. And she had gotten to the point where physically she couldn't drive it. She had a trouble with a shoulder or an elbow that meant that she couldn't shift it anymore. So the car sat for a couple of years, and she still loved the car so much that she didn't want to just put it on Craigslist and sell it to Joe Schmo who was going to destroy it. And she, in talking with one of our members, had mentioned, hey, we've had people donate cars before. So she sent me an email, and we talked about it a little bit, and I met her at the DMV, and she donated her car to the club. Nice. So we now have a white 85 GT that our friend Naomi donated to the club, that we're very proud to have and very lucky to have. And it's got 105,000 miles on it, and it just needs a little bit of TLC, but it's a beautiful car, and we're gonna make that a kind of a core of the club for the while to help bring that car up to tip-top shape. And someday we'll probably sell it to benefit the club. But it just showed how much that even not being a part of the club, she always felt bad that she didn't know about the club when she was younger. She'd have loved it, but that she cared enough about the car even after all these years that she wanted it to come to us.
Yeah, and she knows that people are going to love it just as much as she did too. So
exactly. I sent her the pictures and video of Charlie driving the car. That was the one that taught him to drive it, and she thought that was amazing. She just loved it.
Yeah, it's that younger generation we need to start getting involved. They're the ones that are going to keep us going.
Definitely.
On the flip side of that, do you see a lot of people that from maybe the younger middle age, if they sell and they're out for a while and then they get that itch and they're back in? Do you see a lot of that too?
I feel like we're just starting to see a little bit more of that now. In the last couple of years, we have had a few older members that were around in the early 2000s that all of a sudden are popping back up. And it's kind of that life cycle of, well, when they were younger, it was something that could be a central focus for them. And then they had to grow up and work and family and all those types of things. And now they're kind of on the flip side of that of, hey, I still have that Fiero, and I wonder what the club is doing. So there are a few people coming back that way. It's really heartening to see those people. And, they, much like us, they may have a couple more gray hairs and a couple more pounds here or there, but they're still the fun people that we used to hang out with cruising University Avenue.
Awesome. Couple of final thoughts here. What do you hope to, when the time comes and you step away from, we'll say, the club as the president? You're still heavily involved, but what do you see as the footprint you would like to see left behind after your many years of president?
I guess the things that I would like to see are really just kind of a legacy of invitation to both the younger people in the club and in the community to kind of step up and show that they can do it. A lot of people look at how we plan car shows and say, hey, I want to volunteer, but I don't know how to do anything. And we always have to explain to them that the secret is none of us do. We learn the things that we do through experience and through trying and sometimes through failing, and that it's okay to step up, to take that position, to attempt to do things and to try to change them if you need to. And also, just with back to the 80s, I just want people to, I don't like to use the political phrases of all inclusive, but it really is what it is we want everybody to feel like they can come together for that type of a celebration. And, the Ford guy doesn't feel bad parked next to the Chevy guy, parked next to the VW, next to the Honda. It's all the same era. It's all the same time. It's the same experience. It's those shared experiences that bring those people out. Mm-hmm. And we just want them to remember that, hey, these people cared enough about creating that shared experience now to do those things. So those are really kind of the legacy things I think I'd like to hear from other people in the future.
Yeah, and as long as everybody gets along and the family grows, I think that hits the nail right on the head. And bringing everybody together in that Back to the 80s show is awesome. I mean, again, I want to get up there because I want to see how you have different people act when you have the newer cars show up at car shows, and you go to a show and you've got the Model A's, Model T's, then you have your hot rods, you have your vintage, and then you have the new style, and everybody looks around and everybody has a different attitude. But I think what you guys captured, and going along with what you see the legacy going on, is that everybody came together. And
Exactly.
Even if they're different cars, it's the same era. Everybody has a different personality, but everybody came together.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
So, yeah, like I said, now you just made me want. Maybe we'll get up there. Maybe not this year, but I think 2021.
Good. I'll count on you for that one.
All right. Now I have it on recording too, and it's on a podcast, right. So I can't back down because you're like, hey, you said it, and I have it.
I'm going to make that my ringtone.
So I want to thank you again. It's been a great honor talking to you. So,
well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. I know you'll be able to get you on a podcast again when I do the Midwest Fiero Clubs ones. So looking forward to that one.
Absolutely.
But, thank you again. So if anybody has any questions or about the club, your event, Tyler's event, again, where can they get a hold of you guys?
Really, finding us on Facebook is probably the best and the easiest way. We are Minnesota Fieros Forever Car Club on Facebook, as well as Back to the 80s MN. And there's the Tyler Shipman Memorial Car Show there as well.
Very cool. Thank you. Also want to thank Rodney Dickman Accessories, the Fiero Store, and the Midwest Fiero Clubs, as well as FieroFocus.com, Fiero Focus Magazine, and check us out on our 2 Facebook pages at N.I.F.E Club and at Fiorama. So again, thank you. If you have any questions on future podcasts that you want me to try to get involved with, you can email me at mkroyer@FieroFocus.com. And again, Rob, thank you very much. It's been
Thank you, Mike.
And I wish you a very good night.
Thanks, you too.
you.